Humor isn't supposed to live where depression and suicide do, but today it does. Welcome back to Shit Creek Survivors. We share real stories against stuck up Shit Creek, the paddles we use to get out, and motivation for those stuck up their own Shit Creek right now. Today's guest is Frank King, a mental health comedian who uses humor to talk openly about depression, suicidal thoughts, and recovery. Let's get into it. Well, Frank, thank you so much for joining us on Shit Creek Survivors. It's such a blessing. And if you would introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Well, first we need to clear up the fact that I'm not here voluntarily, that they should know this is part of a plea bargain.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
A
that's,
government worked
yes,
out sort of.
yeah, it was this or jail. And I thought, oh, okay, all right.
Good choice.
No, I'm the mental health comedian. I
Hmm.
speak on suicide prevention as a workplace health and safety priority, including to law enforcement, first responders who more first responders die by suicide than the line of duty. So it is a radically bad rate of suicide, not the highest industry
Right.
in the US.
Hmm.
That's construction. 1,000 people die by accident roughly every year in construction. 5,000
Wow.
die by suicide. You're 5 times more likely to jump off the building than fall off.
I didn't know that.
Uh, I began my career as a comedian, and people go, wait a minute, a comedian talking about suicide prevention? How does that work? Well, I think a comedian is a good choice. The world's first comedian was a court jester, and the court jester's job was to speak truth to power on behalf of the powerless with humor. I believe I speak truth to the power of mental illness on behalf of those often powerless in its grip with humor. I believe where there's humor, there's hope. Where there's laughter, there's life, that nobody truly dies laughing. And depression and suicide run in my family.
Hmm.
It's called generational depression and suicide. My grandmother died by suicide. My mother found her. My great aunt died by suicide. My mother and I found her. I was 4 years old and I screamed for days. It's trigger warning. What you're about to hear could raise strong emotions, so you might want to mute for about 90 seconds if you're worried about that. After my mother found my grandmother, and then a couple of years later could not reach my great aunt, knowing we have a family, got panicked, bundled me into the car at 4 years old. We drove over to her apartment, let ourselves in, nothing out of place until we got to the kitchen. Everything should have been in the refrigerator. Milk, butter, eggs, cheese was on the counter. And it was an old latch type refrigerator, not a magnetic strip holding the door closed, but a latch. And if
Yeah.
you crawled into that and pulled it to, there ain't no getting out. And
Yeah.
that's what my great aunt had done. And as it turns out, at some juncture, decided to try and claw her way out. So my mother, not realizing any of this, I'm holding onto her skirt tail, walks over to the refrigerator, swings the door open, and my great aunt falls out and pins me to the floor.
Oh my
We are
gosh.
face to face, her face frozen at the last moment of horror. And if you're already hardwired for suicide, as I am in my DNA, and you're that close to an actual suicide, and I don't think anybody can get closer, the odds of you considering seriously taking your life later in life go up. And that's what happened in April of 2010. Recession, bottom dropped out of the corporate comedy market, the speaking market, like
Yeah.
80% overnight. Lost
Right.
everything in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and that's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like. Spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. At which point, the audience generally has a nervous laugh. Like, it's okay to laugh. That was the point.
Good.
Uh, a friend of mine came up after a keynote last year. He'd never heard me say out loud, I didn't pull the trigger. So he thought it'd be funny. He goes, "Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I go, "Hey, man, could you try to sound slightly less disappointed?" That's where the humor is in the topic. It's not jokes, but funny personal anecdotes.
Yeah.
And it's, they call it comic relief for a reason. It's one of
Mhm.
the reasons that people hire me to speak, because they
Mhm.
could get a clinician to tell them everything I'm telling them. But
Right.
A, I've got lived experience, so I've got context. When I tell the audience, I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like. You can almost see the 25% of the people in the audience with a mental challenge leaning forward,
Yeah.
and the 75 neurotypicals. Oh dear God!
Right.
I mean, I've got
Right.
their attention at that point.
Mhm.
Um, so that's why I speak on that, because I'm more nuts in my family than a squirrel turd. So I'm a two-time loss survivor, a one-time attempt survivor, and I've got two mental illnesses. One's
Mm,
called major depressive disorder, garden
okay.
variety depression, and then something rare called chronic suicidal ideation. It's not even in the big, DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Psychological Disorder. And what it means is for me and people in my tribe, the option of suicide is always on the menu uh,
Yeah.
as a solution for problems large and small. I think you know this this theory of, hey, I've always got a way out. Um,
Yes.
and when I say problems large and small, I tell the audience, look, my car broke down a couple of years ago. I had three thoughts on bed: one, get it fixed; two, buy a new; and three, I could just kill myself. That's chronic suicidal ideation. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Here's the
Yeah.
thing: almost every time I've spoken, there's been somebody in the audience, sometimes more than one, who has that, and
Mhm.
they don't know it has a name. They think they're just some kind of freak and
Mhm.
all alone. And I mean, I had a young woman come up after a college presentation. She goes, "Thanks for the keynote." I said, "You're welcome." She goes, "But I got to tell you, it made me weep." "How did it make you weep?" She goes, "You know the story about the car, buy a new one, sorry, get it fixed, buy a new one, or kill yourself? I've been having those thoughts all my life. I didn't know that was a thing. I had no idea it had a name. I just thought I was some
Right.
kind of freak and
Yeah.
all alone." And when I heard you say that out loud, I realized the first time in my life, I am in fact not alone, and I wept. That's the power of starting the conversation on suicide. I get on stage and I'm vulnerable. Many men are not, you know, are not comfortable sharing that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I'm vulnerable, and I give them permission to give voice to their feelings and experiences.
Mhm.
At the end of my keynote, I say, "Look, we're going to do some general Q&A, and then if you got a question you want to ask or a story you want to share, and you don't want to share it in front of everybody, like, hey, Frank, I'm crazy. Can you help me?" Then I'll hang out another 30, 45 minutes. I'll take them individually. And sometimes there's two people, sometimes there's 10,
Right.
but almost always a line. And most of the conversations begin, "I've never told anybody this." Huh, I get that
Mhm.
a lot. Because, the stigma, there's a stigma to mental illness, there's a stigma to thoughts of suicide, a
Mhm.
separate and distinct stigma to thoughts of suicide. It frightens people.
Yeah.
They just don't know. Brene Brown said, and I had said this many times in different ways. I think she said it best. Um, I'm so comfortable in my darkness, I can sit comfortably with you in yours.
Ooh.
Which, I don't get spooked. I did a show on a construction site, and mostly men. And when I got done, half dozen guys lined up, guys, surprised me. And the last guy in line was crying so hard he couldn't speak. So I
Mm.
waited. And when he gathered himself, I said, "Hey, man, what's up?" He goes, "Well, I haven't slept in 2 nights. I work on the fifth floor of this building. I think about jumping off every day." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "Because I've lost three people close to me in the last year to violence, including my daughter who died in my arms." I'd like somebody to pull the pin on that emotional grenade and drop it in your lap. So the HR guy who hired me wasn't far away, so I waved him over. I said, "Listen, you need to go get the EAP, Employee Assistance Program binder. Find the
Mhm.
mental health facility closest to where we're standing right this minute and literally take this young man by the hand in the drain." A couple of months later, I had occasion to talk to the HR guy, and I'm terrified to ask, what happened. Finally got up my nerve before we hung up. I go, "Hey, man, whatever happened to that nice young carpenter, the black guy? Frank? He got evaluated, medicated. He's back on the job." Yes. That's the power of starting the conversation. I'm guessing his workmates had no idea. I bet you a lot of his family had no idea how close he was to jumping off that building. But
Mhm.
go in, be vulnerable, give them permission. That's really my job. I feel like George Bailey, that I've been showing what people's lives might be like if I weren't there simply to tell my story and hear theirs. And if I were not there, if I killed myself, then I, in theory, could take a lot of those people with me who never had a chance to share their story. So I'm stuck.
Wow. Yeah.
I can't kill
Wow.
myself.
Yeah, wait, that's a great way to
Yeah.
work around, yeah, that beautiful. Well, I'm so glad that you're here and you're helping people on a daily basis, and it is a lo it I've had the same thing where people come up to me afterwards or have contacted me on the street, and they're like, "Hey, I'm glad you talked about this. I didn't know anyone else was, even talking about this," and it is
Yep.
amazing to see, um if you're willing to tell your story and kind of put your shoulders back, even if it sounds embarrassing, people will grab onto it because they want authenticity. They want to see someone, who's been through it compared to just like a doctor who can just tell you, oh, maybe you should take this medicine and maybe you should work out. It's like,
Yeah.
talking in front of someone that's actually been there. And instead of just, standing on the edge of the creek and being like, hey, maybe if you go backwards and you jump this way and that way, it's like the person who's willing to get in the creek and sit in the mud with you and come up with a plan, compared to just
There
dictating everything. It's, having someone there at your low
yeah.
point is great.
Well, here's a story that I think parallels the Shit Creek and what you just said. There's a story about a guy who falls down a well,
Mhm.
and he's down there and he can't climb out. And somebody comes by, a friend of his comes by, looks down and goes, "Oh man, I really like to help you, but I have no idea." And then a
Mhm.
second person, a stranger, and same thing. God, I wish I could. And then a third guy comes along, looks down, oh, crawl the floor of the well. And the guy who's stuck in the well goes, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
He goes, "I'm here to help you get out." He goes, "But you're down here with me now." "Yes, but I've been here before."
Mm.
That's the
Yeah. That's the good stuff.
and I've had a young woman come up after a show at, Wofford College. She came up to me and she said, "Can I give you a hug?" And I'm thinking, "Oh, dear God." It's right in the middle of Me Too movement. Everybody in the room's got a phone with a camera in it. I can see the
You
headlines in
got
the paper
your
tomorrow.
your
Speaker
hands are
gropes
out here.
co-ed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hands
I
are
gave
way
her a
out
hug, but I
here.
pushed my pelvis back as far yeah, my pelvis is as far back as I can push it.
Yeah.
And when we got done, I said, "Are you a hugger?" She goes, "No." What was that? She goes, "Well, I've been in therapy for a couple of years. I have similar conditions to what you have." And the woman is good. I mean, she's got there's all kinds of diplomas on the wall, but she has
Right.
no context whatsoever. She goes, "I'm in the back of the room, 15 minutes into your little keynote." I'm thinking to
Yeah.
myself, this guy is inside my head. She said, "You did more for me in 45 minutes than that woman's done for me in 2 years."
Beautiful.
Because, I hear the same music. I understand exactly where she is, and how she thinks.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's, and people ask me, does it trigger you to tell your story over and over? No,
Yeah.
actually, it's very therapeutic because of the things that happen afterwards.
Mhm. Yeah.
The people that like the construction worker and, you know,
Yeah. Absolutely.
so
I found
I go ahead.
I was gonna say I found by telling my story, the more I tell it, it's almost like I'm processing it a little bit more every time. It's like I'm able to see a different angle, or I'm able to kind of like like focus on a particular portion that I know is more applicable to the listener. You know what I mean? So it's funny
Yeah.
as you tell your story more and more, not only does it help the people around you, but it actually helps you. It helps you process it. It helps you kind of package it up so you can present it each time in even a more powerful way. And it's crazy that the things that we think are our worst thing, either suicidal ideation or alcoholism or just choices and things that we've done we're so embarrassed of can actually be life giving to other people who are out there struggling with the same thing because you're finally running into someone who's like, I know where you're coming from. Or like you just said, you are in my head. I don't know how you know
Yeah.
how I'm thinking about this stuff alone at night, evaluating my life, Um, but it's nice to know that someone's been there as well and that I'm not alone. And that's a beautiful, beautiful
And
thing.
the George Bailey story came to me after a friend of mine whose dad had been in AA for 20 years,
Mm,
uh, from the time he was in his mid 40s to the time he passed away.
mm,
And somewhere near the end of those 20 years, somebody at a meeting asked him if he would drink again. And he said, no. He said, how can you know that? He said, because of all the people I've sponsored and all the people I will sponsor. If
mm.
I dive back into that bottle, I'm going to be taking people with me.
Yeah. I
So
like that. You're
kind of the
you're building like,
same
yeah,
thing.
like you're building like that idea of responsibility. It's like, hey, you've got stuff to do and it's not just about you, which I appreciate
Yeah,
that. It makes the picture a lot bigger. You know what I mean? Instead of your tiny, isolated, like I was, tunnel vision. This is all I look through. Your vision can get bigger, and that ends up because when you're in fight or flight and just trying to survive, this is all you can see for the longest time until like you kind of let yourself develop, let yourself grow through the pain, let yourself go, where you need to go. And especially getting help. Getting help is not an easy thing, but I found that by speaking the things I was thinking, I was almost able to correct myself 50% of the time. Like if you say the things out loud that you're thinking, you're like, that
yeah.
sounds kind of extreme, or wow, that sounds a little different out loud than it does in my head, or you know, the therapist doesn't have to say much to me these days. She just kind of and I'll I'll catch myself talking, but that's interesting. And I the idea of comedy being the best way to get there, I think is so powerful. Anyone who's been in the service or anyone who's been in a first responder or in situations where you're viewing gory things, like imagine a doctor on a daily
Mhm.
basis, they tend to lean towards a little bit of dark humor because it is a way to handle those
Oh, yeah.
situations in the moment, and it's not a bad thing. It's just a way of kind of processing what's happening, you know, kind of getting it out of your body, looking around at the people around you, and all that kind of stuff. I totally get where the comedy comes in because you're willing to listen to someone who's going to cut a couple jokes. You know what I mean? Um, and
Well,
I
and
do know.
occasionally go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
Occasionally somebody will say something to me and they don't realize it doesn't, to them, it sounds innocuous because they haven't thought it through.
Right.
But to me, being a comic, part of being a comic is uh, observing, listening almost more than talking.
Yeah.
So Michelle, who was was the meeting planner for NAMI Oregon, National Alliance Mental Illness. I booked a keynote, and she
Hmm.
called me. She goes, "Well, what are you going to cover?" And she knew I put a gun in my mouth. I go, "Well, Michelle, what do you want me to cover?" And she goes, "I don't know. Just give me a couple of bullet points." So I let that hang in the air until she realized, "Oh dear. Oh, oh, oh." I go, "Relax, Michelle. It was just too good to let it go by."
Right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And it's funny, you see those people freeze for a second, and then you're like, "It's okay.
Yeah.
It's
Guy a
okay."
guy called me a guy called me late one day because it was about like 15 minutes late past time he's supposed to call. He goes, "Hey man, I hope I didn't leave you hanging." I said, "Would you like to rephrase?"
That's pretty funny. I try to use comedy in a lot of my presentations to kinda, like, disarm people initially. So if I'm talking in front of police officers, man, it you there's no smiles in the room. It's just kinda like, I don't wanna be here. I'm being paid." So you have to kinda, like, really grab their attention. But what was more intimidating is when I was invited to go to the local jail and talk to inmates. And I was like, "How am I gonna pull this off?" So the first thing I said to them, I go, "Hi, my name's Cameron. I am a former police officer, but I did get shot in the face, if that helps." And they all just started laughing, so right then I was like, "See," and
Well
then I
done.
talked about yeah, and then I talked about being an alcoholic, you know what I mean? Like, no one it can happen to anyone, a doctor, a homeless person, you, me, whatever it is, and but it it doesn't matter. It doesn't define us. And we can recover and all this kinds of stuff. And I told them how hard it was for me for a while. And, afterwards they were coming up to me, shaking my hand, saying, "Thank you. I appreciate that honesty," and the idea that a police officer could do that too. I was like, yeah, of course. I'm a human being. But had to, during this whole process, I've had to basically eliminate an ego, you know what I mean, as best I can because,
Yeah.
I can't be tender about the reactions that I may receive. I'm just there to kind of give my points of view, give my story, and then hopefully it lands on fertile ground. Yep.
Yes. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yes.
I did a show at a refinery in Washington State, upstate, northwest corner of Washington, a BP refinery. And there were 62 people in the room, and they did a survey at the end, and then I had lunch with the people that booked me. And they
Mhm.
said, "Frank, do you want to know about the survey?" And I said, "Sure." And they said, "Well, 60 people, great numbers. They thought it was appropriate. They were glad you were here and they learned a lot." And I said, "The other two?" And they said they thought it was inappropriate. They didn't think you had any business being here. We shouldn't be talking about this. And then they said, "What do you think about that, those 2 people?" And I said, "Permission to speak freely?" And they
Mhm.
said, "Sure." Fuck them.
Yeah.
I wasn't there for them.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Well said.
I do what I do. I say what I say. I tell them. I mean, what if there was one person in the room who really, really needed to hear that?
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
you can't please everybody. It's yeah.
It
It's forgive the f bomb, but that's that's what I said.
No, I get it. I mean,
You
sometimes
know,
in the
I
pursuit of helping even helping people, you can be like, "Oh, I'm not reaching enough people, blah, 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 blah." And then I hear a whisper in my head, it's like, "Well, it's not about the numbers, it's about the person." It's about finding the right person, and if that's just one person, then you've done it, you know what I mean? And that's where it is.
yeah,
But the world wants you to believe that, numbers and popularity are very important in order for you to be, you know, uh, known or a speaker or something like that, when that's not true. Authenticity breaks through all the time, in conversations on the
and
street
vulnerability.
and
Yeah.
vulnerability. Absolutely. If you can stand across
Well,
from another
my
man
goal
and
is no. Go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say, if you can stand across from another man and look him in the eye and be like, "I'm screwed up too," you're not alone.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's it.
that is that's that's a good place to be because 'cause you're right there with that person, you're
Yeah.
not alone, and you're working on the same thing. It's eventually AA becomes sort of like a friendship club, which is really weird because you don't wanna be there at first. I didn't, you know what I mean? I'm hat down in the back, I'm not like you. "Oh, I've got an allergy to alcohol, that's it. I'm not an alcoholic," and then you start learning by going to the meetings, "Well, maybe I am," you know? You're like, "Maybe I'm part of this club," and then once you start admitting, "Maybe there's something I can learn here," and you start talking to the people within the organization, and they give you advice that really matters, instead of just some Joe Blow on the side of the street, and you put it to work and it improves your life, man, is that contagious? You're like, "Who could I tell this to?" Who could I improve with this information? It becomes,
Mhm.
yeah, it becomes addictive because it feels good. It's like at one point you were in a place where you're so low, like I felt so low, I'm worthless. There's nothing. I look what I've done. Look at my story. It's terrible. And now I'm telling that same story to people and they're receiving it with like, "Oh, thank you for telling me that story." I'm like, "What?" It's crazy what we can do with these stories. And you've gone on to tell how many on TEDx? You've done like 13 events already?
13 just booked my 14th.
Whoa. Wow. May I ask, is that a nerve? Well, you're a comedian. You've been on stage. You're used to crowds. So maybe that isn't
Oh,
a
yeah.
nerve. You're not a big deal.
Actually, it's the one place where I get nervous
Is it?
because it's on when I can do my comedy, routine in my sleep.
Hmm.
And I've
Hmm.
almost done that where, I get to a cruise ship. You're not supposed to perform on a day when you just finished traveling 36 hours to get to the other side of the world. And
Right.
they're banging on your door and they go, the dancers can't because the weather's bad. Can you, sure, fine. Go up and do 2 45-minute shows after no sleep for 36 hours. Um,
Wow.
so it's, yeah, but TEDx is a one shot deal.
Right.
It's not it's material that I wrote, and I memorized the outline, I know the material, but I've never done it before, and
Mm,
it's gonna live forever on YouTube. So
right.
that makes me nervous. That's
Yeah.
about the one but on stage as a comedian, I'm more comfortable up there than in real life, but
That's
in the
interesting.
TEDx, and by the way, um, the way I warm it up with police officers, law enforcement, I wanted to be a police officer. That was on my bucket list. And
Hmm.
when the recession hit, when I tried to kill myself, the I was 52, and somebody told me there's no age limit really. If you pass the fitness test, they got to consider you for hire. So
Yeah.
I was living in the state of Washington. I applied with 12 different departments,
Oh, really?
and I passed the fitness test 4 times. I was the oldest
Hmm.
person at the time to ever pass that fitness test. And so I tell them like, and then, you guys know there's a fitness test, and then there's polygraph. And
Mhm.
apparently, the questions on that polygraph haven't changed in the last several decades. Because
Mm.
I told the story on stage in a cruise ship, and a guy came up after and goes, "Man, I had that polygraph 30 years ago. Same question."
Yeah.
So they ask you a question in blocks: your driving history, your financial history, your sexual history, your criminal history, and then they wire you up, and they, a lot fewer questions. Well, one of the
Yeah.
questions on the test to this day is, "Have you ever had sex with a farm animal?" Comma, comma, if only by accident. I
If
said,
only by accident.
yeah, I said to the polygrapher, I know I'm not supposed to laugh. I know I'm not supposed to say anything, but I'm just fascinated. I mean, I understand the first part of the question. Have you ever? What
Yeah.
fascinates me is the disclaimer. Are you getting some big strapping Eastern Washington farm boys in here who can't get past this question without the disclaimer? I swear to God, Your Honor, the sheep just kept backing up.
You
And when I tell what when I tell that story to law enforcement, now I've got several others, several other things that happened. I came this close to being, I was on the short list for Seattle PD.
Oh, cool.
But they had a lot of guys coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, young people who, and my
Yeah.
training officer was not supposed to tell me this, but he said, "Look, Frank, it wasn't anything you did or didn't do. You did great." He said, "But we got a lot of kids coming back. And, 3 years ago, nobody wanted these jobs. We'd take a shot at a 52-year-old guy going to the academy. But,
Right.
you know, so but I have several stories like that about the process. So by the
Yeah.
time I get done with those, yeah,
Mhm. Then they know that you've been through it for real. Yeah, that's one of the I don't know, that's the beginning of it all, you know what I mean? You go through those tests and the polygraph and all that kind of stuff and get hooked up to the machine like you see on TV, and yeah, it's
yes.
funny that they
And on
haven't
the
changed
short
it for a
list,
long time. Yeah, and
no.
on the short
And,
list.
and
Y
on the short list, and they come to your house. They sent two detectives to my house at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning to see what your home life's like, kind of by surprise.
Right,
And I was
right.
on a ship somewhere. I was out working a cruise boat doing comedy.
Oh,
So
really?
my wife answers the door. She looks him up and down. Yeah, she looks him up and down. She goes, "Look at this. Two detectives at my front door first thing Monday morning. Just like old times. Come on in."
Just like old times. That's really funny.
Yeah. She's
And
got
I
a
bet they
great
were
sense
like,
of humor. So,
yeah, sounds like it.
yeah.
Sounds like it.
So,
All
yeah. So
right.
that's how, I mean, I try to find a connection with the group some way or
Mhm.
other, some commonalities like that.
Yeah, yeah. And then you're able to kind of pivot in it in your keynotes to, let's, I've been here, this happened. Would you explain, if you would, the what made you not do it?
Oh, I wish it were a romantic notion.
Yeah.
It was very practical. You talked about burdensomeness. You feel like you're a burden on everybody around you. The world would be better off without you. That's very common in suicidality.
Yeah.
Well, we lost everything. I had $1 million in life insurance. I can fix this.
Oh.
My wife would be brokenhearted, but no longer broke.
Mm,
So, but I sold insurance right out of college, and I knew every life insurance policy has a 2-year suicide clause at a minimum.
mhm.
So I called my agent. "Hey, man, how long have I had this policy?" He goes, "I don't know. I'll check." And we came back on the phone. He'd realized what I was asking. I wasn't asking how long I'd had it. I was asking for permission to kill myself. So he
Yeah.
goes, "You've had it for 22 months and don't do it." Because he'd gotten phone calls like that. The policy had been in
Yeah.
force and he delivered checks to the beneficiaries. So I had to wait 60 days to kill myself. I was not going to leave my wife broke and
Right.
brokenhearted.
Right.
So I had to wait 60 days. And fortunately, by the time 60 days had passed, I wasn't counting the days and the bankruptcy went
Mhm.
through, the phone calls stopped, things got, marginally better. And so I was able to, break the surface and take a deep breath and move on. So it wasn't my life insurance policy saved my life.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? And
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean,
it's a
if that thing had been enforced, we would.
yeah. And it's alarming that a person who is considering that I'm speaking to right now and has empowered so many other people, it's in that moment where you actually believe it's a good choice.
Yeah.
That's the strange place where not a lot of people have let themselves go if they've never been in that situation. You know what I mean? They've never actually allowed to themselves to project that far into it. Um, but yeah, it is startling that you
Well,
can actually in a moment believe that it's the right choice, and you can 10 minutes later all of a sudden be like, "You know what? Actually, no, I'm not gonna do it today." And it gets that
yeah, because
close
I gotta wait.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
it like
I actually put the gun in my mouth. I pulled the hammer back just to see if I could do it.
yeah.
And every now and then somebody says, suicide is, don't you aren't they thinking about the people they're going to leave behind? I go, yes, as a matter
Mhm.
of fact, they are. I was. They
Yeah.
believe strongly that the world would be better off without them. So it's
Yeah.
almost selfless. I mean,
Yeah.
it's irrational, but
Mhm.
almost selfless, not selfish.
Right.
Because, and that's what I tell parents if they got a child, a young person who's living with depression and thoughts of suicide. I go, look, don't tell them they got so much to live for. That's not going to put a dent in it.
Mhm.
You need to join the conversation they're having in their head. And here's how you say to them, look, I bet it's crossed your mind that you're a burden to your mom and me. And in no uncertain terms, are you a burden to your mom and me? And it's probably also
Mhm.
crossed your mind that we would somehow be better off without you. And in no uncertain terms would we ever be better off without you. Because
Mhm.
that's the conversation chances are the kid's having in his head or
Yeah.
her head.
Yeah. That's important, and when you're right there on that edge, if someone you care about, who you literally believe they'd be better off without you, looks at you straight in the eye and says, "I love you, and I don't want you to go anywhere." You're like, "Really?" Like, you
Right.
almost like yeah,
Yeah.
y you're like,
Yeah, but
okay."
things are
Like,
bad for you. No, things aren't that bad for me. That's no.
I've literally looked at my wife and said, like, "Why are you still here?" at points, and, like, you know what I mean? Just like,
Yeah.
anyone who comes near me, I bite them. You're the one who's near me the most. I end up biting you and like, getting angry about dumb stuff, and you're having to absorb this energy. Why are you here? She's like, for better, or for worse. And I'm like, what? Like, how lucky am I? How blessed am I? And, 5 minutes
Yeah.
before that, 5 minutes before that, I'm thinking that I'm the biggest bummer to the world, and you start believing that thing you keep recycling. So anyone who's
Yeah.
listening, if you're recycling that in your head, do not. The more you tell that story, the bigger the lie gets. And yeah, you need guys like Frank. Frank's been there. I've been there.
Mhm.
You're not the only ones out there listening who are having those ideas, the idea of a gun in one hand and a bottle in the other, like John Wayne or something like that. That's where I was. It 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 didn't make me feel better. You know what I mean? Playing that role of, "Oh, I'm John Wayne, hard done to dude. I got my whiskey, I got my gun," this sort of thing. And it was a lie. It made that feeling in me grow deeper and what's crazy is we let that fester, or I did, for so long until I was in a place where I felt hopeless. I just hope that
Yes.
anyone, yeah, who like, why I shouldn't have let myself go all the way to the point. But at the same time, hindsight's 2020, right? So all we can really do is like kind of share what's happened to us.
Oh,
But
yeah.
like, you don't have to go all the way to the point where you're going to collapse physically, mentally, and spiritually to ask for help. Like, if especially if you get the sense that you're getting into something you can't handle, please reach out for help, or, just talking to someone about not even what you're worried about for 10 minutes can actually help you. So, you know, you
Yeah.
just got to keep kind of going. And 10 minutes later, your mind can totally change. The chemicals can change and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, yeah. I'm so glad that Frank was able to come on today because, I mean, to have another brother in arms when it comes to actually being in that situation, and me realizing I'm not as crazy as, well, at least I'm as crazy as Frank, you know what I mean? And Frank's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Frank gets to tell people just like we do how things go along or around in his head, and people get set free by it, set free, thinking
Yeah.
that they're bound, thinking that they're, you know, that they're not worth much, and thinking about, maybe I shouldn't be here. And then someone like Frank gives a speech right in front of you, and all of a sudden you start crying because you realize you're not alone. That's beautiful.
Yeah, I spoke on base at Fort Irwin, the National Army Training Center
Very
outside of
cool.
Barstow, California. Yeah,
Wow.
it's 30 miles off the freeway, and they call it the world's largest longest cul-de-sac. It's
Mhm.
just dead ends into and they did a survey. 30% of the soldiers in an anonymous survey said they'd had thoughts of suicide the previous year.
Yeah.
So they brought me in, and I did a couple of keynotes. And at the end, second keynote, I did the general Q&A, and a young man said, "Do you think the Army's doing enough for mental health?" I go, "Well, I can't speak for the entire Army, certainly, but I can tell you, I believe Fort Irwin is. That's why I'm here." And I
Mhm.
didn't know the general who ran the place was standing right behind me holding a microphone. I didn't know he was there. And so I said, "Here's the deal, soldiers. Fort Irwin gives a shit." I turn, I see the star in the middle of his chest because, they wear it there now so they don't get picked off by snipers. And I looked at that star and I turned back to the audience and said, "Anybody besides me poop your pants at that moment? Anybody?" And the general steps up into the microphone and he goes, "Soldiers, Franklin's exactly right. Fort Irwin gives a shit.
Good.
So it needs to come from the top."
Mhm.
And 3 months later, I got a DM from the base psychologist. He said, "Frank, a soldier walked into my office this morning, stood there at my desk and just said, 'I'm depressed and I'm suicidal and I'm here because Frank King said I had to tell somebody.'" Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. My
That's
goal is to save
equity.
a life a day.
Yeah, that is equity. I tell you what, when I was laying on the ground, I thought I was dead. The first thing I thought was I didn't love enough people. That was my first thought because I was about to meet my maker. I was like, I didn't love enough people. And I plan to the next time I cross over for my heart to be even tired, I guess you would say. You know what I mean? In because we get caught in this idea that life's supposed to be comfortable, and if it's not, then it's an oddity and we're doing something wrong, when the truth is life is not a comfortable situation.
No.
And we're doing our best. We're all doing our best, and, yeah, I for a long time thought I was lower than everyone. I was like, "Oh, I can't wait to get back to being a person," and, I'm here, but I need to get there. That was all me playing tricks on myself,
Yeah.
thinking that I was less than, and it was all just I needed help mentally kind of processing and untangling sort of what had happened, and learning that kind of like my reactions were sort of a normal reaction, leaning into alcohol and almost,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, burning it all down.
Yeah. What's the normal reaction to an abnormal situation is what it is.
Yes,
And,
yeah, and
alcohol is it's not a bad short term solution, but long term,
yeah. Yeah, I ran into that. The body needed more alcohol to feel a certain way, which meant it started running my life even more. And by the time it was at its worst, I mean, everything was revolved around alcohol. Everything. It was like from the point I wake up to the point I pass out. It's like where am I going to be drinking? Am I going to be comfortable? And if I can do all that, then I'll have a good day because I'll be able to handle the emotions. I'll be able to handle the conversations, and then you know the bigger the bottle got, it made things worse. I knew it too, but when you're kind of going down that path, at some point you're just like, "Screw it. I'm gonna burn it all down. I don't even care."
yeah.
And then right at the end, your ego jumps out the window and you're no longer standing there with, "Oh, no one knows." You're standing there afraid, or at least I was. I was like, "Oh, shoot. This is actually about to happen. I'm about to actually kill myself with alcohol after getting shot in the head." And I had to go all the way to that where I got so desperate and scared, I was willing to approach the AA program. I was willing to ask for help, you know? Um, but unfortunately, guys are like that. They'll take it all, they'll suffer. They'll suffer and suffer and suffer and hope it fixes itself. And then to the point they get to the very end, that's when they're running off to grab help. And yeah, we're not really good at asking for help. But
No, and I'm a co-author on 4 books on men's mental health. And one of the things I learned in that process was that men, oftentimes, you have to corner them.
mm,
It has to be, "Honey, look, I love you, but I'm not going to put myself and the kids through this anymore. You have a choice." Or your
mhm,
boss says, "Look, you're a great guy and I love you dearly, but your work's beginning to suffer and you have a choice.
yeah,
Either go to a meeting this weekend and then, X number of times the following weeks, or don't come back in Monday morning.
Right.
It's like, man, you have to, shove them
Hmm.
into a corner where there's no, and I'm sure
Oh,
some
I
people go
agree.
fine.
I totally agree. I had to get to a fork in the road. One way was drinking and basically death, and the other one was suffering for the rest of my life not being able to drink. Like, that's where my head was. I was like, "But I'll be
Sure.
alive." And I chose the one where I'm not gonna kill myself because somehow I survived being shot in the head, and it's the best choice I've ever made, although it was the most uncomfortable choice I've ever made. It was a hard choice, but it's led to so many things, including being sober now 9 years, which I never thought would be something that I'd be, promoting. I mean, you're literally talking to a police officer who would go to houses, encounter drunk people, and go to the same houses all the time and just look across from these people and be like, just stop drinking. And now I'm that guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
If it were that
it,
easy.
yeah, if it were that easy, I didn't
Stop
know.
thinking
I
that
didn't.
way. Oh, thanks for the tip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just pull
Exactly.
yourself up by your bootstraps. That's kind of hard to do when you're hanging from your belt. Um,
Yeah. It's like,
it's
heard
noon.
that one before.
I gotta coach a group session, but this has been delightful.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Thank you so much. And if we can get you on here again at some point to fill us in
Yeah.
on the next TED Talk, that would be absolutely amazing. But thank you so much for blessing us with your time. And till the next time, God bless. If this conversation meant something to you, please follow the show, leave a comment, subscribe, share it with someone who needs it, and leave a review. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time on Shit Creek Survivors.